Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Friday, the 1st of July, comes to you from London. And a sea of red on the screen this morning, and we're into a new second half of the year. And I've already been doing a few posts on LinkedIn just commenting about that. I'm still wearing my Ukrainian sunflower. It's a little bit smaller, national flower of Ukraine. And of course, this whole Russia-Ukraine situation is driving markets into just whole new territory, and we talk about that this morning. Gold breaking below $1,800. That's a bit of a worry now, testing 6-month lows there, and the Nasdaq having two really terrible quarters here. This is a quarterly chart. Not many people draw quarterly charts. We see the quarterly candles. We've just finished a really bad quarter for the Nasdaq. So we've, from a peak at the start of the year, we've just really come all the way back. So that's the backdrop that we're dealing with in terms of the long-term picture of what's going on. We just see this sea of red this morning, and looking at, first of all, we'll start looking at the dollar. The dollar is rising higher again. We're bullish on all three time frames. Remembering this is my weekly, my daily, and my 60-minute chart. I'm running here on Refinitiv Icon, but of course with Updata you can run on lots of different data services. We're compatible with dozens of different data services, Bloomberg, Icon, Trayport, whatever you want. Just click in what you want to feed into your Updata system. And of course the point and figure charts give us all the price targets as well. And keep an eye out for our quarterly report out today. And it's really interesting. Not a lot has changed in terms of the long-term picture. These long-term trends are playing out. So looking at the euro, we're therefore weaker against the dollar, bearish on all three time frames, hitting new lows with new targets here. And of course, if we make new lows, then we lurch lower still. And so that backdrop is not good for the Eurozone. Looking at, and of course, inflationary pressures as well. Looking at Japan, we're seeing the dollar surging here, normally quite a good lead indicator. Sterling sitting at 121. So again, falling lower against that dollar. These tracker charts here, this is the weekly and daily and 60-minute, just showing us how we're just nudging those new lows and the downside targets they're playing out. Looking at sterling against the euro, we're below the 116 level. So again, sterling is looking even weaker than the euro, which is quite key as well. Bitcoin, we are in a sell everything mentality now, and Bitcoin has really suffered from that, and we are seeing bearish on all three time frames. Downside targets on Bitcoin to 15,700, 17,000, 11,000, and this 19,000 target now playing out. So you can't ignore the targets on your charts. And of course, if you trade a shorter term, take a look at the 1-minute charts. The S&P 500 index actually had some pretty big falls yesterday, did recover some ground, but the fact is we are just wandering below on that weekly cloud. And of course the Nasdaq we talked about is leading us already. We're below the cloud on the lagging line with downside targets here. The Nasdaq got much further to fall, and you can read off these targets on your charts. Are really quite key how much lower we're seeing the Nasdaq potentially going there. The futures are down 0.2% this morning. The VIX volatility is knocking on the door of 30. The fear index above 30 is fearful. And looking at the FTSE future, we're down 0.25% here. Most of Europe fell quite heavily yesterday as the US was at its low point, and so we're seeing the Europe not so heavily falling off this morning. The DAX down slightly. The CAC 40 flat, just up a tiny tick. Looking at Asia, we saw Japan down 1.4%, just struggling here, still on all three time frames, and of course we're just falling below the clouds there. The Hang Seng has given up some ground. Actually, in the monthly report that I was writing last night, China and Hong Kong have had a resurgence in recent months, so they're looking less bad than they were, but most Western markets are looking worse. The Sensex in India, still bearish below the cloud here, and if we look at the Aussie market, the market that was really sort of neutral is just starting to crumble here as well. So there's no escaping the fact that equities are falling away. We'll look at the energy mix in a minute, but looking at wheat, we are down 0.8%. As I say, we're in this sort of sell everything market. We've got corn bucking the trend up slightly today, up 0.2%. and still just holding bullish on these trends. So these long-term commodity trends are unchanged, but we are seeing some big moves, and that isn't truer than gold. I mean, we talked about gold. Gold falling below that $1,800 mark this morning. That was really significant. We've still got these upside targets for gold. So it's interesting, we're activating, if we close at this level today, we're activating a downside target, some 20% lower for gold. Doesn't mean we'll get there. Remember, if you're in an uptrend, you don't expect the downside targets to be met. But that is creating pressure. If we see more downside targets kicking in, and on the 0.5% chart, we are seeing that a little bit. We are seeing these downside targets just starting to kick in. 1688 is a target, 1550. At some point, though, because of the trend, at some point we are likely to see a bounce off a low, a new thrust targets developing, and watch the short-term targets for that first, because that's where it will show up first. It's all about the time horizon. But for the moment, gold is set to fall before it rises. And of course, everyone's expecting gold to rise with the long-term inflationary picture. But the reality is we've got to wait. Silver below the $20 mark, so that's really falling away quite dramatically. Bearish on all three time frames now, and then if we look at platinum and palladium, similar picture here. We are in bearish territory there as well. So precious metals, surprising, not doing their thing. Copper we've been worried about for quite a while now. We're seeing that fall away, down another 3.6% this morning through the cloud. So we are seeing a sell-off in some of these commodities, so it's really quite key. US 10-year yields falling back below 3%, just suggesting that people are thinking that the Fed won't rise rates as aggressively for fears of stifling the economy. And of course, you can look at all the individual tech stock charts, and here you see some very big downside targets. And again, we cover that in our monthly report. Taking a look at the energy mix now. We've got Brent crude sitting, it rolled over today, so it's quite interesting on the chart. We are back below the cloud there. WTI is less clear on the rollover side, is actually not rolling today, so we are seeing here that's also just short-term bearish above the cloud. This is my daily and my 60-minute. The long-term trend is still bullish though. US nat gas had some big falls yesterday, just plummeted away there, and really interesting just to see how we're finding the floor at $5.50. That Freeport situation has really hit the gas market quite hard. Coal sitting steady at $250. Emissions this morning breaking 90 euros. That's really significant. That's a really important move for emissions. Finally getting above that 90. We've got targets to the upside here. If you're trading carbon, you need to be looking at these 1-minute charts. We've had this target here for 93.20 in place. That was given a couple of days ago. That's where we're looking to next. Just look at that support, the tram lines there as well. So really quite key. TTF up 3% this morning. We've gone out as bullish to clients here, breaking that high that we saw on the mid-June high, and that's really significant. And again, we've got good upside targets there. MBP is not looking as strong, and we're neutral there to clients this morning. And looking at German power, just no stopping. We gave a target of 300 for German power back in February, and we're now at 297.50 this morning. So almost certainly going to get there. Lots of new upside targets. Watch these price targets on your OTC data. That's really the place to watch it. And we're also seeing Nordic power surging to new highs as well, as are the other power markets. And in fact, our power markets report for all European power markets comes out this morning. And we can see here from the targets where we're seeing these targets. So there's a new target on German power. If you're feeding your Trayport prices into your news alerts, you can just drop these into your alerts mechanism and Updata. You will be getting all your OTC price alerts on all the OTC instruments you trade. You can set these up on Bloomberg, Icon, Trayport, whatever you're feeding into Updata to get your very own newswire with all the trends and targets. So really quite key. As well, there's another one there on TTF this morning, and it's really interesting just watching these short-term trend changes all the way through. And I can see from the color coding on these what the market sentiment is. So really quite key. That's it for today. Keep an eye on those markets and those targets. Have a great weekend. Happy charting. See you then.